Dillon's Furniture, now at their new location on Main Street, behind Dillon's Country Treasures and next to McDonald's, has all your home furnishing needs. That's why it's quality home furnishings for less at Dillon's Furniture. Just behind me lies the body of the Indian fighter. Hi, I'm Greg Larry for HampshireReview.com. I'm in Cacapon Bridge, West Virginia. There's an interesting tale behind James Caudy's life that has created a story that has lasted for over 2 centuries. As the story goes, James Caudy lived from about 1700 to 1784, an interesting time in America. Before the West was won, America was under British rule. It was the time of the emergence of a fellow named George Washington, and it was a time when Indians still staked many claims to the country. As the tale goes, one day James Caudy, supposedly in the 1750s, was going about his business and ran into some Indians. Apparently a problem erupted and the Indians came after Caudy. Caudy fled. The Indians chased after Caudy, who ran for cover toward a towering rock formation, also known as Castle Rock, that rises high above the Cacapon River. He went up high into its rocky perches, which is said to be a better part of 1,000 feet high, and placed himself behind a rocky outcrop just behind the narrow path. And as the Indians came around the corner, Caudy struck them with the butt of his rifle and sent them free-falling to their death below. The story has it that he killed 10, possibly even 15 Indians in this manner before he was finally able to escape. When I heard this story, I was captivated. But is it true? Could this be possible? Who was Caudy, and what was life like in this area at that time period? I've decided I'm going to see if I can find out. Is the story of James Caudy and this incredible incident at what we now call Caudy's Castle fact, or is it fiction? I needed to find out what it was like during that time period. The Hampshire County Library was my first stop. I needed to research what I could find out about James Caudy and to see what Indian groups, if any, were in this area. I also realized that I needed to get some help from local historians. Charles Hall is a name that has been recommended to me. Mr. Hall, pleasure to meet you.
Well, it's nice to meet you, and I'm glad somebody's interested in Hampshire County history.
Oh, well, thanks. I've heard a lot about you, and I'm hoping maybe you can help me. I'm looking at the story of James Caudy. Could you help me with that?
I certainly could. He is one of our early settlers, and he's a neighbor of Joseph Edwards, and I'm intimately associated with Fort Edwards, so anything we can do to promote the colonial history of Hampshire County, I'm happy to help with.
Well, let's fire up the computer and see what we can find out.
Okay, let's go for it.
Mr. Hall, what do we know about the background of James Caudy?
Well, we know something. We don't know as much as we would like, because the history of that period is really anecdotal history. There are very few histories based on contemporary records and reports. Most of them are based on stories that have been handed down. We have a couple of books. We have Kercheval's History of the Valley of the Virginia, which refers to Caudy's Castle Rock and the incident there. And we have a recently published history of Hampshire County that was done that perhaps gives us the best clue about him. It states that he was born about 1707, probably in the Netherlands, which is very interesting. And he came through southern Maryland, and we don't know exactly when he arrived on the frontier, but we assume sometime in the latter half of the 1730s. We also know of one contemporary record that George Washington spent the night with him in April of 1748 when he was returning from a surveying trip to the frontier. He stopped and spent the night there and then crossed the river the next day and went on to Mount Vernon. We know that Washington came back a few years later, surveyed some land for Caudy.
What can you tell us about Indian life in the area? Were there a lot of Indians?
When the white man first came here, there were no Indians. This was a hunting ground, and it was under the authority of the Iroquois Confederacy. But we do know that there was a prominent Indian trail through Hampshire County. And it was a trail that was used by the northern Indians to war on the southern Indians, and the southern Indians, the Cherokee and Catawba, to war on the northern Indians.
Would it be unusual for Caudy to have met and ran into Indians in the same area?
No, it would not. I believe that there's a good possibility that James Caudy used Caudy's Castle Rock when he first came here, before he had built a home, when he was out hunting. It is a perfect place to have a secure camp. The setting is there, either before the war in the 30s and 40s, or certainly in the 50s when there were raiding parties around, and most of the inhabitants of Hampshire County left in the late 1750s because it was so dangerous. There's a report written to Washington from one of his officers stationed at Cumberland that every day they could see smoke in the distance arising from the plantations that were being burned. So it was a very, very serious time.
Mr. Hall, thank you so much for sharing that with me today. I guess the next thing to do is go down and see the actual site. Is there a way I can get down there?
Well, it is a beautiful spot to see, especially on a nice summer day. You can see it either from the river, looking up, or you can go and climb up and look down and see what James Caudy would have seen when he was up there. But I do have to tell you, it is on private property.
Oh, I see.
You do need the owner's permission. But Mr. Johnson likes to have people come see it, so give him a call, and we'll see if we can get together with him out there and take a look.
I'll do that, and I'll get back with you.
Okay.
Thanks
I may join you.
That sounds fine. Thank you.
Okay.
We have found out that Caudy's castle is on private property owned by the Johnson family. And I found out that the patriarch of the family is Glenwood Johnson. It turns out that he is one of the area's top historians as well. I went to see Mr. Johnson to find out what he knew.
My name is Kenneth G Johnson. I was born 1923. At Bloomery, West Virginia. I have lived in this area all my life. I'm familiar with Castle Rock. I have fished by it. I've climbed it. I've heard all the stories about it. We lack proof, but I think the fact that the Indians were present at a time that it has all the possibilities of being true. It's easy to see the recess in the rock, in the path that goes, narrow path that goes around it, where he could step back in the recess and only one man could pass him at a time and he could push him off. I think a question we would ask ourselves, what was Caudy doing up there in such a remote place? That was a close area between the two forts, Fort Enoch and the Forks of Cacapon, and Fort Edwards and Cacapon Bridge. There's a road that went between those two forts. It makes the story a little more possible to know that he could have been traveling between the two forts when the Indians got after him.
And what kind of relationships did the settlers have to endure with the Indians?
We know that they were a threat everywhere along the frontier.
So James Caudy then would have definitely had his share of run-ins with the Indians back in that time period.
Yeah. He was supposed to have been an Indian fighter, so it wasn't his first encounter with them at Castle Rock. If you went out of the fort, you were at risk. After the forts were constructed. Now, before the forts, a lot of people were killed. Well, I simply think he was traveling between the two forts, and his Indian waylaid him, but he was in good shape too, you know, and, well, he simply got in the offset on the path, and as the Indians tried to get to him, he would expose him enough that he could shove him off. Maybe use his rifle, punch the rifle at him, shove him off. He probably didn't want to waste the load he had in the gun. That's an old home rifle, you know, that the last shot would be important to him. He wouldn't have time maybe to, another thing, if he'd have fired the shot, they could have overrun him maybe. He'd been trying to reload his rifle.
It was time to go up to Caudy's castle and investigate the area firsthand. Glenwood Johnson's son, Ken, was kind enough to take us up to the site of the incident.
Ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.